I'd like to now introduce Julianne Miles, the CEO and co-founder of Women Returners, who's going to be speaking to us about back to business and facilitating the return to work. Thank you, Julianne.
Thank you very much, Claire. And thank you to Dods for inviting me along today. Just testing, everybody can hear my sound okay? Nice thumbs up here. Okay, great. Well, it's good to meet you all virtually, if not in person. I actually spent the beginning of this week hosting our 2-day conference, so also talking to a screen, and got quite used to the sort of virtual interaction. Please do ask me any questions going through. And I'm going to be sharing slides. I'm going to be talking for around about 25 to 30 minutes. And then there'll be sort of plenty of time at the end to pick up on any questions. But if there's anything going through, I'll see how it goes and see if I can answer it during the course of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to have a go now at starting to share my screen. Here we go. All right, so right, here we go with the screen share. Okay, so hopefully, again, all up there. Quick introduction to myself. So I am CEO and co-founder of an organisation called Women Returners, and we are a consulting, coaching and network organisation. And this is what we specialise in. We specialise in enabling the return to work of professionals, men as well as women, who've taken an extended career break. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about what we mean by returners before I then talk about returner programs, and then moving on to this, with the real meat of what I'm talking about, which is how to create a successful returner program, how to really set your returner program up for success. So what do we mean? First of all, what do we mean by returners? Because sometimes there's a little bit of confusion when we talk about returners. People can think that we mean maternity returners, people coming back who maybe have taken sort of 6 to 12 months out and come back to the same organisation. That is not the returners that we're talking about here. And sometimes we use the term career returners to differentiate these returners from maternity returners. What we mean here are people who have stepped out of an organisation. So typically they've taken a career break of 18 months to 2 years plus. But we do have people who are coming back after career breaks of 5, 10, 15, sometimes even 20 years. We've got people coming back. A lot of these career breaks are for caring reasons, for childcare, sometimes for elder care. But there's a whole variety of other reasons as well. There can be health-related issues, it could be relocation, often a mix of factors. It's rarely just one story that career returners have where they've been out particularly for a number of years. So what we are doing with the returner program is we are creating a supported route back to work. And the returners who we work with are people who have a huge amount of skills and experience. Typically, they are people who are late 30s to late 50s. Average age of our network. So we have a free of charge Women Returners professional network with 6,000 professional career returners in there. And their average age is 46, and typically they've had 10 years plus work experience. So sort of hugely skilled and talented group. And the majority have also, they're virtually all graduates. The majority have professional qualifications, a lot of sort of postgrads, so sort of really, really talented. So what we're doing with the returner program is we are creating a bridge back to a mid to senior level role. So this is not about bringing people back in at a junior level. What we're doing is we're saying this is a skilled, talented group. And what we want to do is to bring them back in at roles which are suitable for their skills and experience, at a suitable level of pay, doing suitable level work. Sometimes it's sort of transferable skills that people are using. For example, I know that a lot of you are public sector. We have, say, private sector lawyers or sort of accountants or people like that who are interested in using those skills in a different environment. which can often be a sort of real win-win for both sides. But this isn't about retraining. So there are returner programs which are about sort of training people up in a new field and specifically targeting returners. But actually the core of what we're talking about when we're working with organisations such as yourselves is bringing people in and using their existing skills and experience. I say either directly in the same role and the same sector, and often, with an element of transferability. So there are two main types of returner programs. The one which has been sort of most popular, which you probably heard most about if you looked into this area, is the idea of a returnship. So effectively, the term returnship comes from a higher level paid professional internship, but it's sort of more akin to a fixed term contract with a view that if it works for both sides, there will be a transition into a permanent role. So like what you might sort of know as a sort of temporary to permanent type contract. The key thing is that there is headcount at the end of it. This is not just bringing people in for a few months and seeing how it goes. Originally, some of the returnships were set up like that and they weren't so successful. You want to make sure that there is an opportunity at the end of it if it works for both sides. So coming in, professional level work, and very importantly, this idea of transition support. So we provide the returners, as at my organisation, we have a career returners coaching programme, which supports returners through the sort of psychological and practical challenges of getting back to work. And we'll be talking about some of the challenges in a minute, but I think it's important to recognise that we do need to support people through, particularly the first few months back. So that's a returnship. There is then another route. There's a term that I'm proud to have coined, which is now being encapsulated in the government guidance on returner programs, and that's supported hiring. And what we're talking about here is bringing returners back into a permanent role, but with the same sort of wrapper of transition support, coaching, mentoring, training, as they do if they're coming back in on a returnship. So they're the two sort of broad routes back to mid to senior levels. I say there are different types of returner programs. There are some organisations, say for example FDM, St James's Place, they retrain people into specific areas, but what we're primarily focusing on here is a returnship and supported hiring. Okay, so this is a chart which I do particularly enjoy showing, and this is showing the growth of returner programs in the UK since 2014. So I set up Women Returners in 2014 with the idea of bringing a returnship from the US and a concept which developed over there and bringing it over to the UK. So there were hardly any programs in 2014, just a couple of programs in banking. And since then, the concept has grown and grown. So in 2019, there were sort of around about 100 returner employers. So a real mix between companies who are running their own returner, sort of single returnship, but also a bit of an increase in cross-company programs. So say, for example, we've partnered with organisations in the savings and investment sector. They have something called the Diversity Project, which is employer-led across the sector to run a cross-company programme, which is interesting. So it's linking together a number of different employers and doing a returner programme that way. So when we're looking at total number of returner employers, they might have been involved running their own programmes, or they might have been involved in one of the cross-company ones. But you'll see that the returnships have been the most popular concept, but actually supported hiring increasing. I'm not showing 2020 here. You can imagine that 2020 is not quite such a glorious picture. There was a real lull, as you know, unsurprisingly, from round about February into the summer period, where everybody's sort of working out the implications of COVID. A few returner programs carried on, but actually a lot of employers pressing the pause button, and we're seeing them coming back in now. So there will be a dip down for 2020, but see that increasing again for 2021. So why have they been successful? I think the key reason is because the returner programs work for the business and work for the organisation. So a number of sort of just a flavour here for some of the returner employers. We've got say started out in financial services, and there are a lot of names that you'll see here from the financial services sector, banking and beyond, but also programs in tech, programs in construction, and actually increasing numbers of programs in the public sector as well. So, you know, we've worked with organisations like the Home Office, Ofcom, Camden Council, Enfield Council. So really, you know, and really successful programs, slightly different business case. And I think that's interesting for those of you in the public sector to think about. And I'll pick up on that in a minute. The sort of broader business case. This is a lot of the driver has been around gender diversity. And I think particularly when they started off in the banking and the tech sectors. But actually, this is fundamentally about a skilled and diverse talent pool. And that's why it is applicable across sectors, whether you have gender diversity challenges or not. Okay. So the key here, we talked about returner programs, we've talked about the concept. How, if you're thinking about setting up a returner program, do you make sure that it's set up for success? This is really what it's all about. So the first thing I would say is you really need to understand the challenges for the returners and the challenges for the business. The key question is why haven't returners come in anyway? I've said they're a really skilled and experienced group of people. Why can't they just come back in through normal routes? The reason is because there are challenges from a person who has been out on career break. There is this real sort of erosion of self-confidence. It's what we call professional identity. So these are some of the comments we hear so regularly. I just don't know how I'm going to get back to work. I've lost my networks. I'm too old. It's too late. I'm not employable anymore. So all these sort of fears and doubts going through the heads of people when they've been out of the workforce for a number of years. And then what happens is that then combines with the structural barriers. Because what's happened is as we have automated and set up recruitment processes which are very sort of process driven, one of the unintended consequences is that people who have taken a long career break are, in the vast majority of cases, just screened out at the early stages. So what returners say, and this is even incredibly skilled and experienced returners, they might be, you know, say, for example, a highly skilled software developer or, you know, experienced managing director in financial services, all these top lawyers. They're saying, I don't even get interviews anymore. It's like sending my CV into a black hole. So what's going on here? I just saw there's a question coming through. Okay, I'll come back to that one there. So what's going on structurally? The problem is from a hiring manager perspective, there is, when they see a CV of somebody who's got a career break, we get a lot of nervousness. So they're saying typically, they look great, really interesting. If they were applying straight after their previous job, we'd be really jumping on the CV, but they just feel too risky. We need somebody who can hit the ground running. We're not sure they'd be up to this role. So, and this is because we are talking about bringing people into mid to senior level roles. It feels a lot less challenging for a hiring manager to bring somebody in at a very junior level. But if it's mid to senior level, if there's any form of sort of professional experience, managerial experience that you're looking for the role, this is where the nervousness comes in. So this is, say, some examples of what we hear all the time. I need somebody who can hit the ground running. I don't know where to fit in an experienced hire who hasn't worked for so long. So that's what we hear coming through. So these are the barriers that we need to lower. There's a question here, are there any business cases on returner programs from the housing sector? There are some within the property sector, but within sort of public sector housing, nothing that I know about so far. So I say we have worked with councils and they've brought people in with all sorts of different types of background. And I think they probably be the most interesting people for you to speak to. So let's sort of can maybe mention that a little bit later on. Okay, just going to get rid of that now. All right. So I'm just trying to get. So I've got my tech challenges here. Here we go. Let's see if this works. Here we go. So in terms of setting the program up for success, you recognize the barriers, and then the key bit to lower those barriers is your starting point. It's the communication. So you need to be very clear of the business rationale for bringing in this talent pool and communicate that really widely around the organization. Because if people think that this is some kind of help the poor women initiative, if they see it as a bit of a CSR program, it will not work, because the returners coming in will not have the credibility and they won't be given the opportunities to be able to take on an ongoing role at a suitable level. So what is the business case? What's the reason? Fundamentally, it's a fantastic talent pool. So it's a really high caliber talent pool, really sort of fantastically well qualified individuals in there. So that's number one. There is then diversity of gender. And this is important for a lot of organizations where they might have pretty much 50-50 split at junior levels, but as people sort of, as you look going up the pyramid to mid to senior levels, the women have been falling out for all sorts of reasons. So there is often this real sort of shift going up. So that's where, if organizations are looking at refilling the female talent pipeline, this is a brilliant way to bring people in. Not say returner programs are open to men as well as women. That's really fundamental. However, for the people who have taken caring related career breaks, which is, you know, a big chunk of this group, 90% of those are women. So that's what we do see. It's sort of real, the majority of people that you will find applying for a returner program are females. That's why it really helps with the diversity of gender. But there is then a really, really important aspect of diversity that's often forgotten. And this happens whether it's a male, sort of female, whatever gender returner, and that's the cognitive diversity. And that's because you are bringing in people who have taken a different career path. They've had a different set of experiences, and they see the world a different way. And that's what diversity is all around. It's about that fresh perspective, people who can add something different to your team. So that's what, you know, the cognitive diversity, as we call it, that's what returners are bringing in too. It's also really cost effective, particularly if you bring in a cohort of returners. And because you can sort of bring them in, you can create a program. There is upfront cost. But actually, again, even sort of feedback from local councils, they find this a far more cost-effective way of bringing in high caliber talent than going out into the general market, or obviously than in terms of using recruitment agencies. And very, very importantly here, and this must not be forgotten, is this aspect of it being really good for, you know, good for society. It's this positive societal impact. So it's this wonderful opportunity to do something which is good for the business, good for the organization, and good for society. So some of the stats here, there are 1.9 million women on caring related career breaks in the UK. And we know that sort of round about a quarter of those have professional managerial backgrounds. So that's what those stats are there at the side. Okay, so you're starting by positioning the business case. You're saying this is a fantastically high caliber talent pool, and it helps us to increase our diversity at mid to senior levels. And it's a really good thing to be doing for society and the local community. One of the things that we found, so for example, one of the early programs we did was with Tideway, who's building the giant sewer under the Thames. And what they said is that by going out there and talking to women and saying they were doing a returner program, they actually had far more applications from women generally. And they found that it was sort of really positively seen by women at more junior levels of the organisation as well. And I think that's a message we see across the board. If you position it well, it has this really sort of lovely halo effect on the types of people that you would generally attract into the organisation. It is also a way, I mean, one of the things to mention here for those who in public sector organisations, is that it is a way often of getting private sector sort of really interesting and different skills experience, where people might be normally reluctant to move to the public sector because they're concerned about reduction in salary. Once people have stepped out of the career, out of the workforce, they're making very different trade-offs. Often they're looking for an organisation that is more rewarding, that is giving back to the part of the local community. Okay, so that's the aspects here about the business case. Something I do want to flag here is that there are return to practice programs. So again, this might be applicable for some of you. So there are some government-led programs, which are things like, say, sort of return to social work, clearly things like return to teaching. We've had return to the NHS. We're not talking about them here, but again, one of the sort of knock-on benefits of the success of returner programs is that all sorts of sort of different bodies are looking at how to bring people back in who've had a career break. So again, just something to put there on your radar. Okay, so when you're setting up a returner program, you've got the business case right, you've got the positioning right. Who do you need to get involved? And I think here is where you need to think there is effectively a triangle here that you need. You need to have your top leadership involved, as with any form of diversity program. You need to have the champions at the top, and you need to have those people talking about the positioning in the right way. However, that is not enough. I just heard a beeping there. I'm assuming everything's okay, but if not, I assume somebody's going to tell me. Can you just could somebody just put in the Q&A? Because I just heard a beeping there and I want to make sure that everything is okay. Oh, okay, great. Thank you. All okay. Good to hear that. It must have been a beeping elsewhere, nothing to do with me. Okay, so you've got your senior leadership involved. You then, very importantly, need to get your hiring managers on board. Because if it's seen as something that's either sort of pushed down from top leadership or sort of pushed across from HR and the hiring managers don't buy into it, it won't work effectively. So you do need to make sure that they're involved, they're on board. You sort of start with the champions within your organization who are really saying, yeah, we want to have different people in our teams. And then you do need to involve, there is quite a lot of work involved in setting this up. So you need to have HR behind it. You need to have your recruitment teams behind it. You need to make sure that there is this team within the organization who are going to be supportive. If you're a large organization who does have a D&I department as well, then obviously, they need to be part of this support team as well. Effectively the working group for the organisation for getting a returner program off the ground. And often this is where organisations bring in women returners, my organisation, to sort of support this team as well. Okay, so then you need to think, how do we structure a really suitable and supportive program? So fundamentally, the returners need to be doing professional work. It needs to be at a professional level with professional pay. So this isn't some kind of, we can underpay people. It's not minimum wage. It's bringing people in and paying them a suitable salary for the work that they're doing. It's just sort of, if you are doing a returnship, it's doing it on a temporary basis. Clearly, if you bring them in supported hiring directly into a permanent role, you are just paying them the market rates. It needs to be fair and equitable. You do need, if you're doing a returnship, there needs to be headcount at the end of it. Very important, if you are thinking about doing a returner program, is to talk about what flexibility is on offer. So this isn't about creating forms of flexible working just for returners, but what we found is that often organisations, they don't go out there, they don't shout about the flexible working that they do have. Clearly, most people are working remotely now, so that is actually far less of an issue than it was. But all the other aspects of when you work, how you work, if you can offer that, you will make your returner program so much more attractive to those returners who do still have commitments, particularly caring commitments. So talk about flexible working. However, this is not about giving different forms of flexible working to returners that are above and beyond what is offered to your existing employees, because that could lead to resentment, and that's absolutely the last thing that we want. It's just talking about flexibility at point of hire, and making sure that's part of your communications. And in fact, when you're communicating about a returner program, you want to be talking far more broadly than just this is the skills and opportunity we're looking for. You want to be talking about, this is the type of organization, this is what we can offer you, this is the flexibility, this is our culture. That's what really makes it attractive. And you do want to be offering this transition support. So it is, such an important part when people are coming in, that you're giving them that helping hand through. You're helping the returners, and also you want to be training your line managers, because it's a different form of experienced hire for a line manager. So you want to give them a bit of a helping hand, so they know how best to support a returner when they're coming into their team. So then think about each stage of the recruitment process. So if you go out there with your normal forms of advertising to your normal channels, you will probably not get to any great returners. So you do need to think about how you communicate to returners. If you do a very detailed job description, we find that far fewer returners will rule themselves out. We know that women typically rule themselves out. Well, returners, they not only need to tick 80% of the boxes, they need to tick 100% of the boxes, and often more than that. So you need to be waving a big flag saying, please do apply to us. We really are interested in you, because so many of them have had so many knockbacks. They've applied for so many jobs and not heard back, that their default is, this organization is not going to be interested in me. So you really need to go out and say you are, and make it a sort of very open and welcoming. Using channels where you are likely to find returners. And then you need to think about how you're doing your assessment, and making sure that you have reduced any bias. You're not asking people for, give me a recent example of when you did something, without saying, it could be during your career break, it could be personal, it could be from a long time ago in your professional life. You're not asking them for up-to-date technical knowledge. So you really need to think about that. And also you do need to raise with your interviewers some of the unconscious biases that come up against returners. Often because they're not such slick interviewers, people assume they're not as ambitious, they're not as confident, etc. So you need to be sort of raising those issues and making sure that they are mitigated at the assessment process. Then you need to think about your onboarding, and inclusion is so important here. It's not just about bringing the returners in, it's making them feel supported and included right from the beginning. So effectively, it's putting in a very sort of structured support process when they come in. Really, this is where you need a returner program manager, you need to get your working group involved, and create effectively a framework so people can come in and feel supported. Really not for that long. You will find that your returners get up to speed very, very quickly, but they need that support going through those early stages. And do pilot. It's all about, start with a small number. It's about quality, not quantity, and you can scale it up from there. Typically we say, 4 to 8 people is a good starting point. And then you can scale it up if it works. But you do need to, you learn, you evaluate, you work out what's working, and then you build up from there. So that's, they're my top tips. Sort of summarized here, and now I want to open it up to questions. Please do put any of your questions in the Q&A box.
Great, thank you, Julianne. Really impressed with your commitment and innovation in this field, and really wish I knew about these a very long time ago when I was returning to work. It sounds like such a great approach, and one that you don't hear about very often in the workplace. So I'm glad you're waving the flag. a quick question from me, and to kick things off is, especially for those who are returning to work after caring responsibilities, and thinking about some of the things we're talking about today about returning and wanting more flexible working, what can employers do to accommodate both of those things, both the return and the want for flexible working, especially after maternity leave, but also now in times of COVID, where more people have got caring responsibilities?
Yeah. I think the key thing is being flexible with your flexibility as an organisation. I mean, I think what we have found is that the most successful flexible working models are developed individual to individual. And I think it's because often returners will come back in, and they do, say if they've got an elderly parent or they have young children at home, they will say, I need part-time working. But then they can find when they come back into an organisation, if there is the flexibility, maybe that they can start early and finish early and have a couple of days working from home, then actually full-time working works just as well for them as for the business. So I think it's having that open and honest conversation. And what we do recommend is having it at the outset. Don't say to somebody coming in, and I think this is a returner or anybody else, what sort of flexibility are you looking for? Because that's a really hard question to answer. People don't want to rule themselves out of a job by saying the wrong thing. I think the key thing is saying, these are the sort of ways in which people work flexibly within this particular team and within our organisation. Would this fit with the type of flexibility you're looking for? And we find there you can get this balance between what works for the business and the team and what works for the individual.
Lovely. Yeah, so it's almost like organisations need to build up like a library of models to think about and consider, so that they're not caught out or feel that it's impossible or too hard, and managers are caught not knowing how to support that.
Yeah. And I do think we're going to see a lot of changes, because I think one of the challenges before for returners coming back with caring commitments was how hard it was in certain sectors to work remotely and to work from home. And clearly, we've all had to learn how to do that this year. So I do think that's going to be a real shift. I mean, I'm actually interested from the audience, I don't know, rather than a question, if anybody wants to put in any comments about this, because I think this shift in the availability and just the openness to flexible working is really going to change how we all work.
Yes, that's great. Thank you. I'd really like to hear from anyone who'd like to put that in the Q&A. Yes, so I believe that, yes, that there is anyone would like to mention anything that maybe they've experienced, or any way that this subject resonates for them? Like I said, it really resonates for me, thinking about when I was returning to work and some of the barriers I faced. So we've just got a question, something coming through here. So yes, as part of our, as someone's put up here, as part of our gender equality commitment, our university runs a returners program for academics who are returned back for research commitment who are to return back to research commitment after a career break. Presently, arguments have been put forward for similar opportunities for professional staff and technical staff, but there seems to be resistance in pursuing this because there is no research element to the roles of professional staff. This is often heard, this resistance, these barriers. What do you think can make the leadership rethink this unequal stance, Julianne?
Yeah, I think, again, it's back to this bit of, this would be really beneficial to you as an organisation. And I think it is the sort of fundamental starting point, is helping your leadership to realise that they are probably losing talented people working within the organisation, but then missing out on a really interesting talent pool of professional staff and technical staff to bring in. And I think within universities, university type professional roles can fit so well with people who have taken a career break and do have caring commitments at home, because often, there is the flexibility. Sometimes, there are opportunities to go with the peaks and troughs of more the sort of the university type term times, and that works incredibly well for returners. So I think that's why I think it's rather than often it's how it's communicated. Because I think often the communication about a returner program in the early stages is, how can we help people out there? And I think it's more saying we're missing out on a great talent pool and a really interesting talent pool for us as an organization. And then I think it shifts the conversation.
Yeah, so recognizing, and again, cost saving in the long term, that there's a great pool of people to draw on from within the organization that they already know, that they already have relationships with. Absolutely. I'm not seeing anyone else responding right now. So I suppose one of the things that I'm thinking, if you were talking to a manager or an organization, head of organization, who was really being quite hard-headed about this and not seeing a way around it, what would be some of your sort of gems that you would sort of get them on side? You've already mentioned quite a few of them already, but I just wonder if you've had an experience where you've really turned someone around who's been quite resistant.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, if you talk to people about this sort of broader business case, there isn't a lot of turning around required, because frankly, it's blindingly obvious that it's a great thing for organizations to do. It's not like trying to persuade them. They don't even have to be wanting to do things for social good. They just have to be wanting to get great talent into the organization, I think, and all leaders want to do that. And I think the barrier is getting from this is a good idea and I think a good thing for us to do, to we're going to put a bit of budget behind it. And I think that's where the challenge is. Yeah. So it's typically not getting people to say this could be interesting for us. It's typically, is it a priority? And I think that's where it will vary organization to organization as to what the tipping point is. And that's where those of you within organizations need to think, what is it that's a real strategic priority for us as an organization? Is it about diversity? Is it about skills? Is it about being sort of future ready? Yeah. And I think there is another point here, which I find really powerful, which is that if we are all going to be working for 40 to 50 years, we are all going to want or need to take career breaks. So assuming as an organization that career paths are linear is just not realistic. So,
not anymore.
yeah. So if we want to prepare for the future, this is, something that we need to do. So I think that's another angle at it, which often can shift people's mindsets. The other thing that I think is really powerful, Claire, is if people can relate it to their personal experience. And I think there is something about, who do you know on career break? It could be, sister, wife, it could be often people that you used to work with, or somebody in the local community. And once it becomes real, and we have so many success stories on our website of real women, and most of them are women, we do have a few men, but these really sort of powerful, talented people. And you're saying, these are the people that you could bring into our organization. And that's what make it personal. And I think that makes it interesting.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. Yes, and I think the tide is turning where we'll see more men hopefully on these programs, because they're spending more time, as Matt so beautifully spoke about earlier, spending time during shared parental leave, or, being involved in more of that side of life that has been so female centric for so long.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's an important, because if this is seen, it's like, I'm sure with the conversation you've had about flexible working, if it's marginalized into this is an issue for women with small children, you are far less likely to get the broader business buy-in.
Absolutely.
If it's the bit about we are all, it could be an elderly parent, it could be, somebody is sick in your family, it could be your own health issues. You step out and you find it hard to get back in. So it's that bit, it's sort of, I think if people realize there is a far broader need for this, then again, that starts to shift perceptions.
Yeah, lovely. Great. Thank you so much, Julianne. It was lovely to meet you and to hear from you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And yes, it's a pleasure to talk to you all. And if anybody is interested, we are womenreturners.com, and just get in touch with me via there. Happy to sort of continue the conversation with anybody this is of interest to. So thank you very much, Claire. Thanks for inviting me along.
Thank you. Very, very interesting.